Welcome to the Jeff Knows Inc. Entrepreneurial Show with your host, Jeff Lopes.
We are live on the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. Super excited to have on today Marcus Kowal. What is up, brother?
Nothing much, just, Wednesday morning in Los Angeles, enjoying the beautiful weather.
We got connected, oddly. I never knew who Marcus was. He never knew who I am. He's in Los Angeles. I'm in Toronto, Canada. We got tagged on a post and it brought up a conversation. And I was like, I just did a little background. I'm like, this guy is interesting. I'd love to have him on my show. And a couple weeks later, here we go. So I'm excited to learn more about you. And let's start off, like, honestly, there's so much to talk about today. Let's get right into it. Let's start off by you growing up in Sweden and your travels, because you've been to so many countries. Let's start the journey and what got you landed and finally into the US.
Oh wow, I'm gonna try to do this quickly. That's I moved from Sweden when I was 15 to Birmingham, which is the equivalent of Detroit in the US, I would say, as far as just not a great city, not a nice city, an industrial city. For anyone that watches MMA, where Leon Edwards is from, and I went to school in a very rough part of Birmingham called Chancellor Wood, Kingshurst, and that's where I started doing martial arts, by the way, for all the wrong reasons. And then I went from I would work in Germany during the summers. I would do summer jobs, a month or 2 months, so almost a total of a year in Germany. After living in England, I went back to Sweden at 17. I was back there for a year. I wasn't on the right track in life, I would say. And so I went back to Sweden and then went back to England again to start university. I did 1 year university. Then I went back to Sweden again to join the military. I was with the Rangers, with the Special Forces over there. I got injured badly, where it took me 2 months to get back to walking again. And then I moved to Paris.
Stop there. So what happened in that injury? And how old were you?
I got kneed in the back. And you think in the military and in the special forces had nothing to do with that. We were playing a sport that's supposed to be non-contact. This guy by mistake was running and he was going to jump over me, but it became a flying knee that landed next to my spine. So I had an internal bleeding next to the spine that put pressure on my sciatica. So I was bedridden for a couple of days and then started walking with a walking table and with a crutch and crochet for a couple of months. So I couldn't continue, of course, and once I was out, I said, all right, I'll move to Paris. So I moved to Paris, where some friends of mine were living at the time, and then went back to England to finish university. Once I was done with university, I had no clue what I wanted to do.
What'd you take in university?
I went to the University of Kent in Canterbury.
Yeah.
In a beautiful university, beautiful city. And that's where I really started taking kickboxing more serious. I started the university kickboxing club. I won the equivalent of the NCAA, which is BUSA over the British University Sports Association's kickboxing, and I became Sportsman of the Year at the university year 2000. That's how old I am. And then when I was done with university, all I wanted to do was fight. I wanted to continue my fighting career. It was either I wanted to improve my boxing, so it was either Cuba or Mexico. It was easy for me to get into Mexico and get a visa there. So I moved to Mexico and continued my fight career in Mexico, in kickboxing and boxing. I started doing boxing to improve my hands, but I fell in love with boxing as well. So I was, boxing. And then
did you ever have any amateur or pro boxing fights?
Oh yeah, so I fought professionally kickboxing and professional MMA, obviously for quite some time. I made my pro debut in Mexico in 2001, and I ended my career in MMA in 2018, I think it was. So 2018. So it was a pretty long career, but it was kickboxing and MMA that I fought professionally. Boxing I fought amateur for a long time. I fought in the Golden Gloves twice. I took second 1 year, semifinals 1 year, and then I took silver in the title boxing world championships as well.
Interesting.
So the reason I ended up in the US It's a longer story. I'm going to try to make it short. While I was in Mexico, I was traveling to visit my parents, and I was with this guy who heard me speak a few different languages, and he asked how many languages I speak, and I told him, and he asked,
how many languages do you speak?
6 and 2/2.
Seriously?
Yeah, the 2/2 is so, because I lived in France, I can still read it somewhat and I can understand it somewhat, but when I try to speak it, I speak Spanish with a French accent. My Spanish is fluent, my German is fluent, and then Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, similar languages but still different. And the other half to me is Portuguese, because I'm surrounded with Brazilians. I understand it pretty good, and when I speak it, I speak Portuñol, where I mix Portuguese and Spanish. So yeah,
I'm Portuguese, so yeah, that's interesting.
And then so he asked me if I had any university education. He asked if I had any military experience, and I told him I was a ranger, and he said, I think I have some people that want to they would like to get to know you, to speak to you. And I this is pre 9/11, so I didn't have a cell phone that worked in the US. So I gave him my parents' home number, house number, and then I left from visiting. I didn't even think any more of it, and my mom called me, and she's received a lot of not so good calls over the years. And then she calls me, she said, why is the US military calling our house looking for you? I went back, I did all the training, and again, this was pre 9/11, so my social, they got me a social. So my social is a military social. But then, and I was fine with going, at the time, once the 9/11 happened, to go down to Afghanistan. I thought it was a worthy cause. And I came back to sign a 4-year contract and get shipped out. And then they said, we need your green card number. I said, I don't have a green card number. You're the ones that sorted everything out for me. But after 9/11, immigration laws changed a lot. And I sat around and tried to get me the green card. Didn't happen. So after 3 weeks, I thought, all right, I can't just, that was my next 4 years plan, but can't just sit around. So I went back to Sweden. And then I had decided, I do want to live in the US, and I wanted to continue my fight career. So it was either, I wanted to be close to the beach, I wanted good weather. So it was either Florida or LA. And at the time, LA had a great master's program in sports management. So I did my master's in sports management at Cal State Long Beach. I didn't know anything about Long Beach. All I knew was that Snoop Dogg was from Long Beach. And so I moved to LA without, I had a couple of friends that lived here, and yeah, that's how I ended. That was in 2002, and I've been here ever since.
Your parents are still around? They're in Sweden still?
Yeah, no, they are actually half the year. Then summertime, they're in Sweden. In my opinion, Sweden is, during the summers, those warm months, that it's absolutely beautiful. Yeah. But they spend the winter half of the year in Florida.
Interesting. So they're not too far from you when they are in the winter months. So you visit them, I'm assuming, in Florida?
Right. We actually, the family gets together, and we usually spend it with them in for Christmas in Florida. And even though we all spread out, we're all over the place, all of us, me and my brothers. And
how many siblings do you have?
2 brothers, they're twins, but they're very different, very, very different.
Where are they based out of?
So my one brother is in Sweden, is a lawyer, is a partner in a big law firm in Sweden, and my other brother is in Detroit.
What does he do in Detroit?
Was in the automotive industry. He's in the consulting industry now. They work a lot with military. It's called Seraph, and they're based out of San Diego. So luckily, he comes down here sometimes, so I get to see him. And they work a lot with the military. A couple of the people involved with the company are Navy SEALs as well. So he's also very active, does triathlons, Ironmans. We ran a couple of ultra marathons together. We ran the Grand Canyon from rim to rim to rim together, and we did another ultra that was called the Backbone. That was 72 miles. So and our third brother also just ran his first marathon. So we're gonna do a couple of ultras together, all 3 of us. I think we're still very close as a family.
That's pretty special. I love that. When did you do your first ultra?
That was the Grand Canyon.
That was the Grand Canyon, huh?
Yeah.
How much training went into it, or you just spurred at the moment? Let's do it.
You know, um, uh, uh, running has become a huge part of my life, and I know we'll talk more about what's happened in my life, but it's been a big part of just finding my way back in many ways as well. So we did, after ending my fight career in 2018, my brother said, right, you got to do something, we got to do something together. How about we run the Grand Canyon? And as a fighter, I've always been running because as a way to keep the weight down and for the stamina, but no long distances per se. I ran a marathon in 2004 because someone challenged me, said I couldn't do it. I said, what was your time? She said 4 hours and 20 minutes. I said, I'll do under 4 hours, watch. And then I trained for 2 weeks for that. And I did it in 4 hours and 56 seconds. But that was the fun. And before that marathon, the furthest I gone was 10 miles. Yeah. So I thought, I've got 4 months to train for this, for an ultra marathon. So I started running. I'm like, right, how difficult could it be? You put one foot in front of the other. But there's so much that goes into long distance running, ultra marathons, as far as, yes, the mental,
the psychological aspect of it, right?
God, it was, and then an ultra is hard, and I had 4 months to prepare for it. And then my brother calls me one day, and I'm like, I just did 22 or 23 miles, it feels good. And he goes, where are you running? I said, oh, down in Manhattan Beach. He goes, have you seen the Grand Canyon? And you need to incorporate some incline training. So then I started doing a bunch of incline training, a ton. And I thought I was prepared, but truthfully, nothing can prepare you for the Grand Canyon. It's a reason why it's considered one of the world's 7 wonders. Yeah. And that wasn't even the issue. The issue was the heat. We did it at in beginning of September, which was a very, it was the memory of my son, and I will talk about in a bit. Yeah. And the work that I'm doing as an activist, trying to make change in this country when it comes to drunk driving. So we did 50 miles, ended up being 52 miles, but 50 for 05. 05 is the BAC, the legal blood alcohol content level that we're pushing for. But September is really, really hot, and we were in constant contact with the rangers in the Grand Canyon, and they said, hey, we can't stop you guys, but we want to let you know that we highly suggest that you don't do this. It's going to be really, really hot. We're expecting 104 degrees. There was a 10-mile a distance where there was the pipes were broken, so there was no water. And on average, 18 people die every year at the Grand Canyon from falling, heat strokes, and dehydration. And I really I didn't know what I'd signed up for, to be honest. It was 8 of us that started. It was 4 of us that finished. There was 2 helicopter rescues out of the Grand Canyon that day.
Wow.
It was one of the toughest things I've ever done in my life. It was not 104 degrees. It was 108 degrees. And as you go up the North Rim, there's no shade, and the heat reflects off the rock.
Yeah.
So there was parts of it where it was confirmed 125 degrees, but it could have been parts where it could have been as high as 150 at times. So mentally, one of the toughest things I've ever done.
How long did it take you to complete it?
17 hours.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was.
Let's talk a little bit about your journey. I mean, your son Liam and obviously your mission on, like, it's so powerful. Let's dive into that all. Let's talk a bit about that. And I'll let you go with it. I won't ask questions. I'll let you go with it, and you just let me know what you want to talk about it, and we'll take it from there.
My son was killed actually on the 3rd of September. So just a few weeks ago, we celebrated, definitely didn't celebrate. We passed our 6-year anniversary of losing my son, who was 15 months when his life was cut short by a woman, 72 years old, who was driving drunk at 3:30 in the afternoon on a Saturday. My wife's sister, Liam's auntie, was going to pick up food. Both of them were struck by this drunk driver who didn't stop at a pedestrian crossing. My niece, my sister-in-law survived, and my son did not. He was declared brain dead the following day. And I've learned a lot. I've learned so much over the past 6 years in so many different areas that I would love to have blissfully continued to be ignorant of. But from, I didn't know that you can be declared dead through the brain. Most of the time people die because the heart stop. So we thought at first he was going to make it. We thought he was going to survive. And then to find out that, his brain had no function. So we decided to donate his organs. That was another thing I wasn't aware of, how many people, you couldn't fill the Yankee Stadium with all the people that are waiting for organs. And it's so easily done today to sign up to be an organ donor. More than 50% of the population are not organ donors. So I would highly recommend people to sign up to be organ donors so that other people can live. And then, as a parent, I can't think of a worse pain than losing a child, right? And I've always been very even tempered, even emotion. I've never had mood swings. I never had anxiety. I never had depression, and all of that is part of your grief work coming back. And it's it's the toughest fight I've ever had. It's the hardest journey I've ever been on. And but I at the same time, I decided while we were still in the hospital that I refuse to let my son's passing just become another statistic of drunk driving. I didn't know how big of a problem drunk driving was in the United States. I didn't know that over 10,000 lives was taken every single year because of drunk driving. I didn't know. That's the equivalent of a jumbo jet crashing every single week. I didn't know anything about politics in the United States. I didn't know, because that's our mission with our nonprofit, Liam's Life Foundation, is to lower the BAC, which, the US is a country that's been very divided over the last couple of years. And there's certain things that, you can have different opinions on. But when it comes to drunk driving, it's scientific. We know exactly what each point.
It's black and white. There's no sorry, continue. But I mean, there's no question about it. Either you're past the limit or you're not. And in reality, like you're saying, even in Canada, I mean, we're very on par with you guys. Like that limit should be dropped.
Yes, and Canada, interestingly enough, I've been speaking to over 18,000 high school students over the past 6 years. Obviously, 2 years where I wasn't out because of the pandemic, but sorry, 16,000, not 18,000. But I've been part of this program called Every 15 Minutes, which is a great program specifically teaching young kids about drunk driving and the effects and the results of drunk driving. And it actually came from Canada, because Canada used to have more deaths every 15 minutes. That's the name of the program, and that's why, than the US. But Canada has changed its laws. But not just Canada, more than 100 countries have lowered the legal BAC from 0.08 to 0.05. And there's very few laws or bills that can be introduced to change the law that has so much statistics behind it as drunk driving. We know that in all these countries, more than 100 countries, the limit's been lowered from 0.08 to 0.05 or lower, and without a single exception, the fatalities due to drunk driving have dropped. And in my opinion, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that, right? But so I was naive enough to think that, well, this makes sense. This will be an easy change in the United States. But that's before I knew about lobbying, and especially dark lobbying. And, I live in the US for a reason. I love the country. I'm definitely for capitalism. I think if you work harder than others, you should have the right to have it better than others. But I'm also from Sweden, and I know the benefits of a country, such as in the US, people say socialism, and it's the same thing as communism and Marxism, and it's not at all. There's so many advantages with socialism, such as free healthcare, free education, and when capitalism starts penetrating the legal system, the political system, healthcare, and there's no caps, then it's not good. And that's truthfully the problem in the US. That's why the population is becoming physically and mentally unhealthier. And what definitely once upon a time was the greatest country in the world, and in many ways still is. But just like if you're a champion if UFC champion, just because you're the best doesn't mean that you don't have areas where you need to improve.
Prove on, yeah.
And that's where we're at in the United States. And until we get a handle this lobbying system, nothing's going to change, unfortunately. So that's what we have a documentary that's coming out about this. But that's the fight I'm doing as an activist. But truthfully, where I feel like I can help the most, I people always say, find your why, find your purpose. I already had my why. I already had my purpose. What I do with martial arts. But I have a second why, which is obviously to change drunk driving laws. We know, again, lowering it to 0.05 will save over 2,000 lives a year. 2,000 lives a year, right?
There's 2,000 families. They're not.
Yeah.
That will never shattered. I want to talk about that with you in a bit. I mean, go finish that. There's some questions I want to ask you, but I mean, it's shattered. You're not. It's the ripple effect. The ripple effect where as a dad that my son spent the first 4 months of his life at Sick Kids Hospital. We almost lost him 3 or 4 times. They put us in a room to shut him down, and I refused it, and I kept the process going, and he's beat every odd possible, and he's a 14-year-old, healthy, strong, but as a dad, feeling in my mind and it just reacting to what you've been through, where nothing will ever make that moment change. Nothing will ever make that moment better. I don't care who you are. I mean, the grief. I saw a post the other day when it showed 2 bottles, and it showed a ball in the bottle, a small ball, and they said grief over time. Like, people say grief over time, you start accepting it. That's all bullshit. What happens is you learn how to deal with it. You learn how to consume it. That's all it is, right? And the biggest, I think, fear for any parent is what you've been through, right? I mean, you never ever want to go as a parent through a situation like you've been through. And I just have to ask you, where were you when you got that call?
I was asleep. And so there's something called Fiesta Hermosa in Hermosa Beach, and me and a couple of the fighters from the gym, we have a really tight bond with the guys, and it was over 10 people. You will see Christos Yargos, for example, who's in the UFC. He has a tattoo on his shoulder saying Liam, and me, him, this other fighter, Dima Gerasimov, who was the Celtic Gladiator champion. We were going down to this party, and me and my wife, we had a date night the night before, so we've been out late, and hadn't slept much. I've been teaching in the morning, so I said, you know what, let me just take a quick nap, and then we'll go. And so I wake up from the neighbor screaming in the hallway to the apartment. So I go out and I see her, and she's crying, and she said, your baby. And so I ran out, and it was close to the gym. It was on the street outside, just at the pedestrian crossing, literally a block away. So I see these police cars and ambulances, the whole street is closed off, and I run down, and I write about this in my book that I wrote called Life is a Moment, which spells out Liam, right? About it's, when you watch a war movie, and everything is like silent, it's almost like once a bomb's gone off, right? It's that silence. The only thing I remember is running. And it was hot, and I remember because I was barefoot, I left everything and I just ran, and the heat from the pavement, the asphalt, and I get down there, and the first thing I see is Liam's stroller just in 2 pieces, his little green frog that he slept with every night on the floor, and that's why the logo for the non-profit is a green frog. And that animalistic feeling of, almost like a predator, like a lion that's confused, scared, hurt, and I was just looking for someone to lash out on. I remember police officers tried to stop me from getting in, and pushing them aside, and it's my son. And then I see my wife, crying, and they told us, jump into a police car. We're gonna follow the ambulance. He's got a pulse. His heart is beating. A police officer had done CPR on him, and got his heart to start again. And we followed the ambulance to the hospital, and at first they said, we're waiting, we're standing for hours, and I left everything. I left our dogs, I left the door open, and so I had to call DMAX, and I said, you got to take care of our dogs, just close the door. And he called everyone. So I don't know how long until people started showing up at the hospital. I don't know how media found out. I was just focused on this, and it became world news. It was everywhere, from CNN to it was on the news in Japan, Czech Republic, and everywhere. So we were in this bubble of just trying to see what's going to happen with our son, and then all of a sudden they told us that they were gonna take his ribs were broken, one of his lungs was punctured, and as a fighter, I'm like, okay, that's bad, but he's gonna survive, he's gonna be okay. And then they were gonna take him to do a check on his brain, and then all of a sudden they moved him, and they don't tell us anything. They don't. Can you hear me, by the way? The reception is a little bad.
No, I could hear you perfectly.
And so they move into a different floor, and I said, what's going on? What's happening here? And they said, they are gonna do a CAT scan on him. There's not very much movement. The reflexes they're looking for, and that's when they said they originally were going to drill open a hole because they saw that there was blood on the brain, and then they decided not to. And again, they weren't the best communicators, but I understand, right? They were trying to do what they could, and all of a sudden they called the doctor, who took us into a room, me and my wife, and I said, what's going on? You said you were gonna operate on him. And he said, looking at the CAT scan, we don't think he's alive. And the what happens, and again, learning, right? In order to declare someone brain dead, 2 doctors have to do the tests. Then you have to wait for 12 hours, and then 2 doctors again have to do the tests again in order to declare someone brain dead. And to have to go through these tests and then wait 12 hours, right? And the last thing that leaves a human is hope. And at one point his finger was moving. So you think, like in a movie, right? That's the first sign, and he's gonna wake up and everything is gonna be fine. And then you learn that that move is not from the brain; it's from the nervous system. So it's those things that makes you, God, like, it's pain I would never wish upon my worst enemy. It really isn't. And so they went through this test. He didn't make it, and that was it.
Could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
2 things. I've never been, and I don't know if you are or not, but I've never been a very religious person. I wasn't brought up in a religious home, so I'm a strong believer in certain aspects of almost the Buddhism, like be good to other people, be good to you. Like there's certain aspects of life that you follow and really try to live by. When my son was in the hospital, and I had a lot of my in-laws that are coming from a very, very religious background, we're all pushing upon religion and prayers and all this. And I would sit there and watch. We're very lucky. We have one of the best pediatric hospitals in the world in Toronto, Canada. But I would walk through the hallways and see so many children with cancer, or so many children. He was in the ICU on the 4th floor, which was the most intense ICU in the whole hospital, and it was 6 beds. It was a rotating every day. It would either every couple of days a child would pass away there, and there'd be another baby in there, and it would really question my belief in God and belief in all that stuff. Where was your mindset with your beliefs and all that? Like, how did you feel with all that pain, with that anger? How did you feel with that?
I'm not religious either. I'm
Yeah.
agnostic. I believe in something. I don't know what, but
so you're very much
something.
like me. Okay, you're very much like with me.
Yeah, certainly not organized religion, but
Doesn't it
yeah.
question? Don't you question everything? Don't you question like how the fuck is this all happening when there's so much evil in this world, so much shit happening in this world, and an innocent angel is taken away? Like, it just shit like that. It blows my mind. It really made me question a lot, and build at that moment. I mean, obviously you change over time, but and I was one of the lucky ones, but that hatred towards people that are trying to push that on you, and there was a lot of people trying to push that on us at that moment, right? We were getting priests in the room all the time and trying to, and I was just like, it was really a moment of like, I shouldn't even say this, but if there was a God, like, why is this all happening to all these children?
I just watched something the other day, and it was, I can't remember the name now, from the book, where is Abraham and Isaac, when he's told to take his son's life, and I saw an image of he's raising the knife to take, when God says, "Oh, don't do it. It was a test." And I can tell you this: if there's a God, I don't want a God like that. I don't want a God who tells someone to take the child's life, and not until he's actually going to do it, you say, "Oh, I was just testing you," right? That, how small-minded, how dare you? How would you, just from knowing that pain, right? So, a lot of people did that, right? Where they're like, my prayers. And here's the thing: for me, I know people meant well, right?
Yeah.
Came from a good place. It just sometimes comes out clumsy.
Yeah.
And I get it. I had friends too who said, "I don't know what to say." And there is nothing that you can say,
No.
nothing that you say that can make it better. Just be there. But it was someone, and I got this a lot. People saying like, everything happens for a reason. I'm like, no. And someone said to my wife, actually wrote to her, said, he's in a better place. And my wife said, what can be a better place than his mother's arms? And at least the woman that wrote said, "You know what, I don't know, it's just what I've always been told." So I just, and I get it. And I've had people say really clumsy things to me. I remember I was because it became world news, we were at a wedding, and this guy comes up, and he's from England, and he's like, "Oh, I know who you are. I know your story. I followed it." And he's like, but something good that came from it was, at least every night, when I tuck my son in, I hug him a little extra hard at night. And first and foremost, like, I'm at a wedding, it's not what I want to hear. And I'm like, oh, that's good that you get to hug your son a little harder. You can give him a little harder hug, right? But I get what he meant, and I don't get angry.
No, you can't. You can't.
But yeah, it's hard to be religious, and which I think for anyone, to question that. But yeah, on a more philosophical level, they say you don't get given pain you can't handle, but that's not true at all either. Because I've met so many parents, and especially dads, that lost children and they never come back. So now, instead of one life lost, 2 or 3 is very common for parents to separate after losing a child. And I understand why, or I believe I understand why. And I think it's because, if you loved each other enough to create life, and then when that life is gone, you can no longer stay together. it makes you wonder why. But from having experienced it, it's when people can't communicate their grief, because everyone grieves differently.
I was going to ask you that, and like I said, I told you before we went on air. We just myself, my wife just had our 19-year wedding anniversary, and my story is a lot different than yours. But when my son was in the hospital, those 4 months, we would get to the hospital at 6 in the morning. We would leave the hospital at 6 at night to go pick up my daughter from daycare, come home 7 days a week. We did that, and it was rotating, and we would spend about 6 hours a day just by his bedside, right? And 6-7 hours a day, and then the rest would be appointments and doctors and stuff. And every night we had to leave him there, not knowing if we were going to come back the next day and he would be still alive. And it was just 4 months of this, and we really didn't communicate. I mean, my therapy was my dog, my lab. I would literally take my dog for like a 2-hour walk, Marcus, and that was my time just to clear my head every night. And then I would go home and study everything the doctors were doing with him. And I would come back the next day and be able to sit around the circle table with all the doctors. We had 7 departments. She had 7 organs that weren't functioning. And we had 7 doctors, 7 departments all following him. So I would sit every morning, they have a round table. We sit at the table and we would discuss what the approach or what was going to happen that day. And I was a part of that. And from day one, I was very heavily active in everything they did with them. Like even to the point where at 3 in the morning, if they want to do blood work, they would have to get my approval. They would call me to get my approval. But for that period, myself and my wife, we would get home and we wouldn't talk. We went through about 4 months where our main focus was just getting him home, but we had no communication. And it took a little while before we really started bonding again, to when he got home, because our focus was him. So how was the period after with your marriage, and how did you guys get through it? Like you said, your communication, like I think this is important for other people to hear, right?
Yeah. I think because you don't have to have your life shattered to learn to communicate better, right? So
yes, yeah.
I'm sorry that you had to go through. What did your son have? Sorry,
he was born with a condition. My wife got ill during the pregnancy, and he was born with a condition called high drops, and it caused pretty much all the fluids in my wife to be sucked into him. He became anemic in my wife, and he was slowly dying inside my wife. And my wife thought she had 31 weeks pregnant. She thought she had a cold. She called the doctor, and the doctor was don't worry about it over the phone. You just have a cold, have some chicken soup. And my mom that never interferes in our marriage at all, for some reason, had talked to her that day. And he's like, she called me. It was a Friday. She's like, take Lucy to the hospital today. And she called me. And my mom never called. She called me 7 times that day. My wife got home from work. I'm like, we're just going to go check the baby. Let's go to the hospital. So we went to this little smaller town that has a very basic hospital. And we went there. They did a quick little ultrasound. They're like, you got to get to your delivery hospital. The baby's heart rate is slowing down. And we rushed to the delivery hospital, and everything started from there. When my son was born, he was pronounced dead at birth, and they were trying to revive him. And the doctor came in, and this is going back to the whole religion thing. He looked at me and my parents, and my parents are the most unreligious people he ever meet. My dad has passed away recently. And yeah, he was very close to me. And the doctor looked at us, and I still have his face in my head when I see this. He says, God created a life today, but God has decided to take it away from you. That's exactly what he said to us in a room. And it lost is one day we'll talk about it, but it was a lot of moving pieces that just happened to happen correctly to get him to where he was. And like the hospital at Sick Kids was full that night, and they were going to bring him to another hospital. It's an hour and a half away, and they said he most likely won't make it there. And a baby passed away opening a space at Sick Kids, and they were able to do a UE with the ambulance to go to Sick Kids. Which is all these moments happening, right? And when he was discharged from the hospital, he was discharged 4 months later. We forced a discharge, and he was discharged with CP, cerebral palsy. And they said he would be confined to a wheelchair his whole life, most likely. And we went from possible wheelchair, and I'm all about fitness from day one. So I've been fitness and therapies and life therapies and touch therapies, everything from day one. We went from possible wheelchair to AFOs. He was wearing braces up to his knees. They say he would be in braces, which was a big miracle. But he was in braces till he was about 21. By his 12th birthday, He was out of braces, ran his first marathon at 12 years old with me, and it's been this incredible journey.
Wow.
You see, I'll send you videos. If you go to my pictures, you'll see it. No, not a full, a 5K, 5K.
Yeah, but wow.
Yeah. You gotta see this kid. He's all about fitness. He's works out every day with me. It's just life is. He's incredible. He's incredible. He's my little angel. He's an amazing little kid. And so it was all these different diagnoses. Like we actually went on. I think I told you we on Monday to sick kids. He was followed by 6 departments. Now he's down to 1 department. And the tests were so good that no one going to see us in 2 years. And if everything goes right, he'll be discharged fully. Part of his brain was damaged. His brain was a big chunk of his brain was damaged at birth, and his whole right side of his body had very little function. And through fitness, he's now balanced up. He learned how to do everything with his left hand, and he's became this incredible little left-handed pitcher. Where this kid plays rep baseball, and it's been this incredible journey. So it's been, like I said, that moment, going back to what you're saying, that moment, it took me and my wife a good period before we started really building and communicating again. So let's go back to that, what you're saying.
Yeah, luckily we communicate well, and there was never an issue, and if anything, it just brought us closer to each other. And
awesome.
But I can understand, right? Because my wife's very intelligent, and but when you're so completely distraught, you're always being rational. So she didn't, and she understands the brain very well, and she has a minor in psychology and has done studies on the brain. So she knew, but she just refused. I could tell you the very hardest moment of my life was leaving my son's side for the last time, when they were going to take him, and not just having to leave myself, where I was leaving what I was programmed to always protect, but I had to carry my wife with me. I had to forcefully take her with me. She refused to leave, and we grieved. Grief was very different. I'm a doer. I started just going, and I had to do. And she's the opposite. She's does yoga and ballet and paints. She writes poetry, and so our ways of grieving was very different. But I think we also helped each other, because I would pull her with me, because you do have to move, and she would slow me down because I was going way too fast. Like I was going recklessly fast, and it came to an end one day where I couldn't get out of bed. And I was frustrated. What was wrong with me? I physically could not get out of the bed, and learning, depression again, which is one of the stages of grief. It was very hard for me because I'd never experienced anything like it. So I didn't know what it was. I had a panic attack, and I couldn't breathe, and it felt like, I was dying, my chest. And then I remember, hearing that's how people describe a panic attack. And so dealing with that and first was my memory. I pride myself on, if I say I'm going to do something, if I'm going to be somewhere at a certain time, I'll be there, and I'm not a flaky person, which is rare in Los Angeles. But but all of a sudden, I would completely just forget things. I wouldn't remember things I was going to do. We saw a therapist together, which I'm very, very happy that we did, because one, she was amazing. And two, she would explain these things to me. Like she'd explain that once, your brain is dealing with trauma, so powerful, it can't focus on too many things at once. That's why it's very common that one's memory gets really, really bad during times like this. And explaining our different ways of grieving, right? And so I learned from it. And but as far as the depression, one of the things as a fight and as a gym owner and personal trainer over the years working with clients, I've had a lot of clients tell me, they weren't motivated or they were depressed, and I could never relate to it. I can sympathize with it, but I couldn't empathize with it, right? Because I never experienced it. I couldn't relate. but now I can, and it's changed me in many ways where I see someone and I can just see how broken they are as people. I've always been good at reading people, and I believe part of that was from reading body language really well, and the reason for that was moving to countries where I didn't speak the language, especially when you were younger. You're the new kid in class in school, you get tested, and it's that survival, right? You want to see who's your friend and who's your foe, so you got to learn. When you don't speak the language, you better learn how to understand body language. But now being able to take that, but seeing the mental side of it, I truly believe that no one, with very few exceptions, with a small percentage of people that are born with a chemical imbalance, I think very few people are born evil. Even those people that are born with a chemical imbalance, I don't think are naturally evil. It's in conjunction with, they talk about, nature and nurture, and it's the nurture, right?
Yeah.
And that's truly my mission, along with not mixed martial arts, but martial arts. I'm not mixed martial arts. That's a professional career. I'm a martial artist first and foremost, and martial arts helped me tremendously through the grief work that I've done. And when I speak on this a lot, on beating depression and coming out on the other side. And how do you know that you've come out on the other side? I know that because I can truthfully tell people that I'm happy. I live with a huge scar on my heart, but I'm a happy human being, and I lead a happy life. And I'm on a mission, I'm on a mission to help as many people as I possibly can. And that, you help people become better human beings, happy human beings. Indirectly, you're making the world a better place as well. So
indirectly mentoring, I think, is such a special thing.
Yeah.
I think it's such a special thing. You said that. Can I ask you a question? You have two little ones now. Nico and Luna.
Mm-hmm.
As a father now, how, and I'm just trying to put myself in that scenario, and obviously time changes things, because you get more. It's like anything, like you when you have a baby for the first time, you're very protective, and as they start moving and older, and you start getting less protective, and you start allowing them to do their. Was there a time, and is there still a time when, because of everything you've been through, that you're overly protective, you're overly just, I got to hold them close to me and make sure nothing happens to them? Are you like that as a father? Like, how do you interact with that? And why I'm asking is I'm curious for myself, right?
Yeah. It's a great question. What's, I don't know if you remember, on my son he was hit on the 3rd of September. On the 4th of September, he passed away, or was declared dead. On the 4th of September, 1 year earlier, I don't know if you remember, a picture of a little boy named Alan, a Syrian boy who had drowned, a 3-year-old. There was a picture that was his body was lying on a beach. And I remember seeing an interview with his father, and I was trying to, put myself in, what is he going through? But your mind, your brain doesn't allow you. It protects you. You can't, you go there and it just, don't touch that, come back. And you can't, and it's, you can't go there, and you can't experience, you can't imagine it, and it's good because it's so painful, right? So then once it's happened, I think it's very easy to become overly protective, and we've worked very, very hard to make sure that, Liam was very, very curious, and so are Nico and Luna, and we want them to have that, to stimulate that curiosity, and they have to learn from falling at times and failure, right? But and it's hard, but we're very conscious of it, and the hardest part hasn't even started yet, right? He's doing training, he does martial arts every day, and we want him to have fun and be with his friends. But we're very aware of it. But one day he's going to drive for the first time, right? It's going to be around friends and having that conversation about not getting in a car with a friend who's been drinking, and also not allowing your friend to drive and drink and drive, because it's not just about not drinking and driving yourself. It's like anything in life, right? Don't let others say no when it's not okay. And especially in the US, I know everyone's had a friend that have been drinking, and they ask them, hey, are you sure you're okay to drive? And the answer is always the same. Yeah, I'm fine. Why? Because that's why you drink in the first place, because your confidence goes up and you feel like you're Superman. That's the problem, right? So that's why we shouldn't drink and drive. And if there was ever an excuse, which there wasn't, but if there was, that's been taken away, because with Uber and Lyft and everything else, other drive share options and taxi, you don't have a reason, you don't have an excuse to. And now when we know these facts, we know the statistics, we know that 66% of the US population has been impacted by drunk drivers, whether it's a friend, family, anyone.
What's your mindset with you're in LA, so obviously in Toronto and Canada is legalized, and LA is legalized too. Marijuana and driving.
It's the same thing. It doesn't matter what it is,
okay,
right? It's and that's, I called out Tiger Woods on Twitter when he was arrested, and some numbnut, I'm not sure if you can, what language you can use on your show here, but some moron wrote it wasn't alcohol, it was pills. And I wrote back, you realize that the I in DUI stands for influence. Any type of toxic that will affect your ability to maneuver a 2,000-pound thing that can.
It's a lethal weapon. It's a lethal weapon.
It is, and it's a responsibility. So I don't care, if, like with alcohol, right? If you want to drink yourself to death, that's sad for your family and friends, but that's your decision to make, right? But as soon as your decision will potentially affect other humans, then it's no longer your decision to make. A lot of times, unfortunately, in the US, and again, from being an activist working against drunk driving, I've had a lot of not so smart things said. And one of the things is, it's when Americans unfortunately mistake freedom for being a selfish a-hole, right? And it's the same thing.
I don't think it's Americans. I think that's worldwide. I mean, that's just, I think that's a global issue, right?
Oh, absolutely. Being selfish is a global issue, but here, unfortunately, in the US, a lot of times is, but that's freedom. But no, but it's not about freedom. It's not about, there's many countries in the world that are very free, but it's about doing what's right towards your community, doing what's right towards your population, the people that you have a responsibility towards, your fellow citizens, your fellow Americans, your fellow Canadians, Swedes, whatever it is, right? And that's where I think when it comes to areas where the US can improve is when it comes to, hey, it's not just about you and what you want, it's about what's best for the country as a whole. And that's, that's hard. So
when you say the lobbyists and they get involved, like give me more of an understanding. So I mean, I'm very green on that. I don't understand that. Like, give me like a Cole's Note version of what that actually means and how are they stopping it? Is it the bigger, like the alcoholic companies, like the companies that are making they're the ones with the money, they're the ones stopping us all. That's what you mean by that, I'm assuming, right?
Yep.
Same with the pharmaceutical companies and all that stuff. They're
all the same.
All the same. It is, huh?
And that's why lobbying is such a, like, the idea behind lobbying is great. But again, when there's no cap on lobbying, when publicly traded companies can have lobbyists working in DC, right? And that's truly where the problem is, because a publicly traded company is a sociopath. And what I mean by that is, if you have a private owner of a company, even if you're not a nice person, you have some morals, you have some ethics, usually, right? But a publicly traded company is a sociopath. It has no emotions. It has one job, one function.
That's it.
It's providing your shareholders
bottom line. Profit. That's all it is.
And so when a publicly traded company can lobby under the freedom of speech, which it's not, right? Because it's not an individual. So, but that's what's happening. That's why America is getting sicker and unhealthier for every year that goes by. It's, this shouldn't be Coca-Cola vending machines in an elementary school. It's not by coincidence that they ended up there. Yeah. When you look at the opioid problem that we have in the United States. Now, I remember listening to someone, talking about what we need to do, and we need to have programs and da-da-da. And I'm like, wait, if you look at the crack problem in the 90s, right? It was illegal. It was cocaine that was smuggled into the US illegally, that was then distributed among the gangs that would cut it up with baking soda and then illegally distributed, right? It was very hard for law enforcement to get, that was the war on drugs. Opioids is produced in the United States.
Pharmaceutical.
By doctors. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
pharmaceutical companies, and not all of them, and not everything that they do good things as well, but certain ones, some big names that you can think of, have more American lives on their conscience than any terrorist organization around the world. And it's just because of one thing.
They're billion dollar industries, right? They control. I mean, when you're going to big pharma, you're looking at companies that control everything. I mean, I was just listening to a podcast the other day, and they're saying on channels like CNN, they buy up 80 to 90% of the ad space. So it's just constant in your face, in your face, in your face, in your face. Always somebody with a smile on their face. Always somebody having a great day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that, right, and that's again back to capitalism. Capitalism is great, right, in many ways, but when there's no cap, when it completely infiltrates the structure of the country, then there's a problem. And so with drunk driving, and the truth is, with drunk driving, I don't even think it's necessarily the alcohol companies. I think some alcohol companies somewhere have some morals. Especially, you know, smaller ones that are not publicly traded. But when it comes to, so the problem is the dark lobbyist, and the dark lobbyist goes to, so Utah is the only state in the United States that lowered it from 0.08 to 0.05. I was in Utah when it was lowered. And we've had the bill introduced in California, known as Liam's Law, to lower it to 0.05, from 0.08 to 0.05. It was killed. It was killed in the Public Safety Committee. And that's nuts, right? It's crazy. So the problem in Utah that we saw was not even the alcohol industry. It's the dark lobbyist that goes to Utah. Is an intelligent businessman or woman who says, hey, you need us. We need to fight for you. Because if this goes through, then it's going to hurt your bottom line, right? You're going to go bankrupt. Yeah. So they rallied not just the alcohol industry, but the bars, the nightclubs, the restaurant associations, the tourism associations of Utah, Salt Lake City especially, and said, you need us to fight for you, to not lower the BAC from 0.08 to 0.05. And this specific group is called ABI, the American Beverage Institute, led by Rick Berman, who holds 12 or 13 of these nonprofits, set up as a nonprofit. And I was confused to why. And at first, you know, what a professional name, right? The American Beverage Institute sounds so professional, right? And it's Rick Berman who is behind these nonprofits, all of them in different areas. He's the man behind saying that secondhand smoke doesn't kill, you know, trans fats aren't bad for you. He was on 60 Minutes. He was dubbed Dr. Evil. His own son has disowned him, saying, my father is a demon. Like that, you know, how can a man like that work? Like, that's someone that truly has American lives on his hands. So he was the man, the American Beverage Institute, that was fighting in Utah, and us as well. And here's something really interesting. I had an op-ed in the Washington Post.
Yeah.
3 days later, one of these spokespeople for the ABI had a rebuttal to what I was saying. How can a dark lobbying group such as the American Beverage Institute be allowed to have a rebuttal in the Washington Post to something that can and they do the same thing. It's the same blueprint every time, right? They point the finger in a different direction. Drunk driving isn't the problem. Texting and driving is the problem, which is also a problem.
Yeah.
But that takes some 3,000 lives a year, not 10,000 lives a year, right? And pointing your finger at a different problem doesn't solve the problem at hand, right? So it's very frustrating, and that's what we see today. Social media is amazing, right? It's so amazing because it can get you information that we couldn't get before, and big companies can be held responsible. That's the beauty of social media. But these big companies are not stupid, so they've realized, hey, we can no longer hide facts, but what we can do is skew them, right? So that's what they do. And in Utah, for example, the ABI had these big billboards put up: go to Utah on vacation, leave on probation. And they're saying that, oh, you can no longer have a beer with your dinner and drive. But here's the truth, you know, can someone get to 0.05 at one beer? Very unlikely, but can it happen? Absolutely. Say you never drink, you're a smaller female at 90 pounds, for example, and you haven't eaten all day, and because it's all dependent on these things, right? So could it happen? Yes. But what people don't realize, do you know 0.08? Most people know that that's the legal BAC. Do you know what 0.08 means in drinks?
No.
is 4 to 5 drinks for an average male of 170 pounds on an empty stomach within an hour. At 0.08, you have a legal term you have a term in the United States, legally drunk. At 0.08, you should not be making decisions. We know what each 0.01 of BAC does to your reaction time, to your decision making. You shouldn't, in my opinion, you shouldn't have a single beer if you're going to drive, right? Because you don't have to. But 0.08, it's insanity. It's literally insanity and low. And here's the frustrating part: we're not trying to fight the alcohol industry, right? We're just saying don't get behind the wheel when you've been drinking.
Yeah.
Frustrating thing is the studies showing that if you're not driving, people are willing to stay out longer and drink more. It's not going to have an effect.
So if anything, it'll be a positive to the bottom line if it's actually educated properly.
We have studies showing, like in Europe, where the drinking culture is much stronger than the US. Countries such as Holland, Sweden,
Portugal.
Right, Portugal. All of them, where the drinking culture is much stronger, where the BAC was lowered to 0.05 or lower many, many years ago. We're talking 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And the alcohol consumption has continued to go up.
Yeah.
But we have a third of the amount of death.
My wife was just in Portugal to spend time with her dad, and she was with the kids there for a week. And you go to any fast food joint, McDonald's, Burger King, all combos are served with a beer.
Yeah. You have alcohol in Holland as well, Germany.
Yeah.
But the difference is, but part of it is also the social stigma of drinking and driving. In Sweden, it's not just about, defying and losing your license, and if you're lucky enough not to crash and hurt someone else, right? But it's the stigma of like, you don't do that.
Yeah.
You don't do it. And that's what's the problem. That's part of the problem in the US, where you have movies where it's fun. People are drinking, driving. Look at, 40-year-old virgin. It's like, oh, it's funny that you're drinking and it's not funny. Yeah. It's not funny when you know the results of drinking and driving. What can happen? What does happen?
What does happen? Yeah.
So yeah, that's
I mean, I'm praising you for obviously taking on this battle, and it's crazy. Like I now that you're actually breaking down the whole understanding of lobbyists and what they do and how it makes sense, right? I mean, their bottom lines are affected. They're going to do what they can to push against you and push against individuals like yourself, which there are. I mean, what you've been through, there's millions of people in this world that at one time or another has been through a situation, whether they lost a parent, a sibling, a friend through drunk driving. So, man, I mean, anything I could do to support your movement, let me know here in Canada, and I'll do what I can. I mean, it's touching, right? And it's touching that, and it takes a special person to understand that your voice has meaning, whether it's one person at a time, right? I mean, today, I mean, you're affecting me, right? I mean, your story is affecting me. So it's one person at a time. I'm going to tell your story to somebody else. It's that domino effect. And you have to understand that everything you're doing, never, ever think in your mind, which I don't think you do, but never think in your mind you're not making change, because it is making change. Because every person that knows your story, every person that hears your story is going to keep spreading that word. Because I just want to go home and talk to my wife about your story, and then it's just that domino effect, and it's precious. That it is sad that a life had to be lost, a family had to be so tragically ruined inside, and your heart so broken. But at least there's that moment of understanding that you put in your head that my voice is going to make a change, and it is. So I praise you on that.
Thank you, and it will. I'm telling you that the US, not just in the state of California where we're starting, just because again we have to use almost guerrilla marketing warfare. Yeah. To spread it. We couldn't go in one position because we don't have the money that our opposition does, right? Yeah. But the US will at some point be at 0.05, not just in the state of California, but on a federal level. We are going to I know I'm going to win this fight. And because I know science and statistics are on my side, I know I'm fighting for the right thing. Yeah. And they're fighting for money. I'm fighting for my son's legacy. There's no comparison. So I'm I'm gonna win that fight. And I know I got a long battle ahead of me, and it's an upward journey. And that's part of the reason why I ran the Grand Canyon, to be honest, not just to prove to, and I knew I was going to finish it. And I had a lot of injuries going into. I need a full hip replacement, and I knew what I was concerned about was getting injured, because I was going to crawl the Grand Canyon if I had to. But it was both to prove to myself and show myself, but also to show the opposition, look what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to conquer one of the world's, the 7 wonders of the world. You think you can stop me? It's not going to happen. So it's gonna be a change, and it's gonna be a long journey, but that's okay. But again, like you said, family members, parents, siblings, and so on, and that's just drinking and driving. Like, one thing that we don't learn about is grief, and one thing, especially as men, right? That's part of the reason why I wrote the book as well. I wrote the book for myself. I wrote the book for myself. I started writing when we left the hospital, and I wrote for, it was 90,000 words in 3 months, and was more than, I never written a book. I never written, period. And it became a book, but that was part of my grief work, right? It was
it
was running, writing, because you feel like you're going insane. Like, it's and the problem with mental pain, right, with depression, is that you just got to sit with it. You just have to, and that's why I understand, like, unfortunately, a lot of times parents, and I met a lot of dads especially, they turn to alcohol, drugs, and I get it. You become so desperate to just numb that pain in any way possible. But the problem, like, if you have physical pain, right, you have knee surgery, or you break an arm, you get those pain medications that will take away the pain, and as time goes by, that pain goes away more and more, right? Subdues. Whereas when it comes to mental pain, like, you have to sit with it, and it's so difficult, and it's so painful, and you just have to sit with it. That's why writing. What did you say? Sorry.
Sorry. I was just gonna. As you're talking, something just came to my head right now. Like, I don't know the exact date, and it's been maybe 2 years, 3 years. Locally, there was a drunk driver. He an absolutely some rich kid. He came from, I think I'm probably butchering the story, but he got dropped off from his private jet at the airport, pissed drunk, jumped in his, I don't know what type of sports car, and ran into, if I'm not mistaken, it was a grandfather and 3 children, killed them all. The husband and wife lost all 3 children in one day.
Yeah.
And years later, just recently, maybe 3 months ago, the husband, after 3 years or 2.5 years, he took his own life.
Yeah.
And actually, about a year and a half ago, not too far from myself either, a drunk driver, a mom and her 2 children. She was a school teacher. It was right before school started. She had gone to school just to set up her classroom. She was on her way back home, and a drunk driver at an intersection took her and her 2 children, and they lost. The husband lost his wife and his 2 children on the same day. So these just popped in my head right now, because it was just recently the gentleman had taken his own life years later, probably about 3 years later, and it's the grief.
And again, some people don't take the lives, but the life is over, right? They continue to be, but they ghost of the former selves. And I've met so many of these, right? I had a guy fly out from Florida who lost his 3 daughters and his wife. Same thing. His wife is actually basically a vegetable. She's alive, but he's like, it's the best thing that could have happened to her, he said, because and you could tell, like, it's just so broken. It was just a few weeks ago here in LA where 6 people died, right? This nurse, and here's the problem with drunk driving: it's one of the few crimes where people don't look at it as a crime per se, because you see, this was a nurse. You get law enforcement officers drive drunk. You get lawyers and even judges that drink and drive. Doctors that drink and drive. So it's a societal issue that we need to battle. And that's, again, the other side. Like, that's what we're burning the candles from both ends, right? I'm trying to change the law, but also to let people know, hey, most people don't understand what the effects of drunk driving are, and that's why we do this. And again, the part of what, psychology has always interested me, and motivation, and why was I able to see this through, and again, I will always live with a scar on my heart, right? And I miss my son every single day, and
you'll miss him to the day you're not here, and
of course,
it's never going to go away.
never
Never,
goes
ever,
away. You
never.
learn to deal with it, right? You learn to deal with it, and to live with that pain. And the problem is, grief is something that every human will experience at some point, but we don't learn about it, and especially as men, because we don't learn how to deal with emotions, right? So that's truly my bigger mission is that, right? To show that, because a lot of times the stigma of being a fighter, being tough, and being macho, right? And if I can openly speak about emotions, hopefully I can help others, because that's the only way. Like, if you try to, you can't hide it. You can't hide such powerful emotions. It's impossible. And again, it's we don't learn about it in school, and it's something that every human will experience, even if it's a pet, a breakup, losing a job. You're dealing with some form of grief, and learning how to see depression through and grief through. It's about the difference between living a positive and productive life versus just being right, being there until you die.
Yeah, it's like I think I mentioned to you earlier, like I lost my dad 16 and a little almost 17 months ago. And I'm the 45-year-old that would talk to my dad 3 times a day. Like, I would call him every night. We'd have a conversation before bed every single night. And it was just a sudden, I mean, didn't smoke, didn't drink, power walked every day, just had a sudden heart attack and died instantly. And I had talked to him on May 6th at like 10 at night. We had a long conversation. I got a call at 6 a.m. on May 7th that he had just fell down in front of my mom in their bedroom and passed away, and had a massive heart attack. And I was sitting down having dinner with my wife yesterday. I'm just bringing it up because you're talking about grief, and it was our wedding anniversary. And I dropped my daughter at track. I just came back from my gym. I met my wife, like, let's just we had 2 hours. We could pick up my daughter. Let's go have a quick little dinner. So we jumped in the car. We went for a quick little dinner, and we just started. And it just came up my dad. And I'm 45-year-old sitting for my wife, and literally tears just started coming down my face. This is a year and a half almost. And it's you're still, no matter what, and that's not my child. That's my dad that lived a great life. He was 75, like, he lived a good life, and it still kills me. I still wish there was so much more shit I wanted to do with him, so much I wanted to see with him still, so many things I wanted him to experience with my children, his grandchildren still. So it's hard. Grief is a very, and I see what my mom's going through.
Yeah.
My mom met my dad when she was 13. They got married when he got back from the army. Yeah, 13. They were married for 52 years. My dad took early retirement at 55. My mom took early retirement too. And for the last almost 25 years of their lives, they literally never spent one day apart. And all of a sudden, it's amazing, but all of a sudden she has this empty house.
How's she doing?
Very tough, very tough. It's been a very, very tough 16 months where I've seen these different levels of grief, the pain, the anger, but it feels like one day she's angry, one day she's got pain, one day she feels she misses him, another day she hates the world, another day it's just emotional roller coaster.
It's very, I compared it in the book to being inside of a washing machine and just being washed around with these emotions. And yes, there's 7 stages of grief, but you're right, it doesn't go one then the other. It's like you're going back and forth, and it's different for different people. You think you got getting better one day and then you're not, and it's different too for me. It's like Monday I dropped my son off to school, and for a moment, as I see him running into school, I got really emotional, and because you can't help but think, I should have done this once already. I should have done this with Liam. What would 7-year-old Liam be like? So but again, you said you were crying, like, that's not to be afraid of that,
no, at all.
To 100%, to be able to, right, and that's the problem a lot of times. Like, I've always known that I was mentally strong, right? I was a resilient person, but I've never had to prove it to anyone. Now the world knows to a certain degree, right? What I have, but I know what my mind is willing to go through and what I'm willing to put myself through. And of course, that's truly what humans need to practice. And we become mentally weaker by generation because luckily we live in a better and better world, but that makes us less prepared how to handle pain. And so we have to put ourselves through controlled and structured pain. Sounds crazy, but we have to be able to prepare ourselves for these type of moments and understand that, hey, it's going to happen at some point in one form or another, and this is the healthiest ways of dealing with it. So again, that's part of the my mission and my journey, and especially again, there's of course women too, but I'm a man, and that's why I can only speak for, and I see how men usually struggle more than women because we're not in touch with emotions, and a lot of times
it's that mindset of being the provider, being the strong, being the one that has to brunt it, which is stupid. I mean, of course, we need to be the provider, but at the same time, too, we have to understand that it is okay to cry. It is okay to it's okay to open up your feelings and understand that you're going through something as well as everybody else, right? And being open to that, right?
Absolutely. If you look at the greatest warriors of all times, the Romans and so on, like, of course, they were never not in touch with emotions, and a lot of times dads who mean well, they're trying to teach their sons that, oh, you gotta be tough, no crying, but now you're raising a sociopath, right? Yeah. Like, hey, we have emotions and we have to let those emotions, in order for us to be the best version of ourselves, we need to be able to open up and speak about how we feel. And I know someone who lost his brother in an accident. His brother was killed, was hit by a car, and he told me his dad never spoke his son's name again. I could not speak about it. And so, the good thing about the current generation is that there's so much information. You look at parents that were born in the 70s, 60s, 50s, right?
Yeah.
Like, they didn't know. That's what they were told. Be tough, be a man. Don't show emotions. But now we know that, hey, this is what we need. So it is important to learn, right? And to listen and to dare and to be brave enough to speak about it. And it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt like a motherfucker, right? It's the truth. But like, even me speaking to these high school students, it's funny. I'm planning on a post that I'm gonna make, and this is actually the first time I talk about it. It's like, every time I'm out speaking, and I speak a lot, I do a lot of speaking engagements, and I speak about my son every single time. And like today, it rips a very inflamed scar wide open, and it hurts every time I do it. But yeah, I'm willing to do it because that's how we're gonna make a difference. But it's also on some level cathartic for me, because that's, again, sitting with that pain every time I have to relive it. And it's the only way. There are no other ways. Just like if you want to get into good physical, there's no shortcuts. There are pills for performance enhancers, but when it comes to health, right, there's no shortcuts. There's no shorter way or sin. And yes, change your diet too, but you do need to do the work. And it's the same thing with grief and depression. You have to do the work, and it's going to feel like it's the hardest thing you've ever done. And it's going to feel like, at first, it's going to feel like there's no difference. You're making no difference, but it is over time, one step at a time.
We've been at this for an hour and a half, and as crazy as I'm going to have you back on, because I wanted to talk school. There's so much stuff I wanted to talk about. Oh man, this has been an incredible conversation. God, there's probably about 3 or 4 times, if we were in person, I'd be reaching over and giving you a big hug, man. I mean, oh man, yeah, it's just a tough journey, but you use your strength to do a lot of good, and you're continuing to do a lot of good and a lot of change. So once again, I commend you on that. Man, and I was like I said, I was going through your pictures and seeing pictures of Nico and Luna, and just and the moments you have with them now and how you post them. So I appreciate that, because if you go to my storyline, is everything is about my kids and my pictures of them and stuff. So yeah, I love that aspect of it as well. And Thank you for coming on, man. This has been awesome. I'm gonna put how could let our audience know how could they support you, how could they support your cause, your websites, everything like that. Give us all the information, and I'll put it also on all the show notes and all that.
Thank you. So yeah, Liam's foundation is liamslife.org. That's for the nonprofit that we have for Liam. And everything that I do is on my website, Marcus Kowal, MarcusKowal.com. Where it's kind of a hub for everything I do. You know, I have my martial arts gym, I have my online self-defense course that I teach for speaking engagements to buy the book. You know, I'm writing a second book that's going to take time to get out there because I'm doing so much at once, and you can't. It's hard to sit on many chairs at once, and but it's going to get out at some point. And the work that we're doing with the nonprofit, you can find it all on there as well. And but yeah, you know, when it comes to the nonprofit, the ways people can help is obviously donate. It's you know, we don't take a penny out of the nonprofit. It all goes to travel events or, you know, doing things, but we don't get paid. It's all our time and effort to help others. Like for us, it's too late. Of course, we're doing this for Nico and Luna too, but ultimately it's to make sure that, you know, so other parents don't have to go through what we've gone through, you know. So it is a fight. It's not just mine and Michelle's and Liam's fight, right? It's everyone's fight. It's the United States fight. And it's not just even within the US. Like I hope a lot of Canadian listeners that might think it's okay to have a few drinks listen to this too. And in other countries, I know, you know, in Europe, because when I share this, they're going to hear it too. So it's important to remind, and again, just be good to your community, you know, take your responsibility. That's a job. And yeah, that's Liam's life. You know, it's again, lowering it to 0.05 is just the beginning. We have a lot more. You know, someone asked me that, it's like, why 0.05 and not 0.02 like Sweden? And I said, oh, you think I'm going to stop when we get to 0.05? Ultimately, like, our goal is to end drunk driving, period.
I love it. I love it. I love it. This has been awesome, buddy. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me.